This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans, it's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments takes an in-depth look at the United States Heavyweight Championship 1975 to 1981. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Many United States Heavyweight Championships. Fans growing up in the National Wrestling Alliance's NWA, many territories usually saw some version of the United States Heavyweight Championship defended in their area. The NWA only recognized one World Heavyweight Champion, but like the NWA World Tag Team Championship, NWA territories were free to create their own versions of the United States Heavyweight Championship. Chicago promoter Fred Kohler introduced the United States Heavyweight Championship in 1953, clearing it with NWA president Sam Muchnick. Fred spoke with Muchnick regarding his new sectional belt. Muchnick said that if the championship was correctly described as a regional strap and didn't conflict with official alliance-sanctioned titles, there would be no problem. While there were concerns that fans might be confused about the United States Championship, it eventually became a fixture in many territories. Promoters clarified that the title was not a replacement for the NWA's top title, and NWA officials gradually accepted it. There were multiple versions of the title, several which we've covered in our Title Tuesday series, including Big Time Wrestling, aka NWA Detroit, NWA San Francisco, Central States Wrestling, and even Frank Tunney's Toronto-based Maple Leaf Wrestling promotion. Interestingly, the NWA briefly sanctioned a so-called official United States Heavyweight Championship in the early 1960s, but this recognition eventually fell by the wayside. Late to the party. The 1970s saw many changes to Jim Crockett Promotions, JCP, including original promoter Jim Crockett Sr.'s son, Jim Crockett Jr., taking over the business, and the promotion shifting from a focus on tag team wrestling to a blend of tag team and singles competition. Jim Crockett Jr. brought in Booker George Scott, who shook up the roster and gradually introduced new singles titles. Historian Tim Hornbaker writes of Scott's incredible makeover of JCP. Back in 1973, Scott had taken the reins of Jim Crockett Promotions and transformed it from a middle-of-the-pack organization into arguably the hottest, most talked-about territory in the country. His task wasn't easy. He actually rewired the promotion from the ground up and slowly altered Crockett's antiquated booking philosophies into a cool and stylish new system. He pushed young guys like Ric Flair, Jimmy Snuka, Ricky Steamboat, and Roddy Piper while relying heavily on veterans like Johnny Valentine and Wahoo McDaniel. While JCP had a singles title before, more singles titles were introduced, creating new ways to elevate talent and build programs at house shows, which were the lifeblood of territories at the time. These titles were the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship and the NWA Mid-Atlantic Television Championship. JCP was late in adopting its version of the United States Championship, as the title didn't debut until 1975. Booker George Scott didn't waste any time turning it into the promotion's top title, and the champion became the de facto #1 contender for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship whenever the champion came to the area. Ironically, the Crockett version would become the best-known version of the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship, and it would live on in World Championship Wrestling, WCW, when Ted Turner purchased JCP. The WWE's adoption of the United States Heavyweight Championship traces its lineage to the JCP version, which only adds to its prestige. Building a classic. George Scott's name ranks with some of the territory era's best bookers, and it's easy to see when examining his launch of the U.S. title. Scott knew the value of top-caliber stars in adding prestige to the championship and how this prestige could be used to give the rub to up-and-coming talents. This would be the central theme of the title throughout its run. At the same time, Scott didn't let his other titles turn into yesterday's news. JCP adopted a first-among-equals approach to its titles. The United States Championship was undoubtedly the area's #1 singles title, next to, of course, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. But the other singles titles, The Television Championship and the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship were both booked as prestigious and held by some of the promotion's top stars. This allowed the promotion to promote house shows with championship main events that fans wanted to see. In light of all this praise to George Scott and his booking of the area's titles, it might seem odd to learn that the first United States champion was crowned in a Phantom tournament. Announcers told the fans that a tournament was held in Florida and that former NWA World Heavyweight Champion Harley Race defeated Johnny Weaver, a living legend in JCP, who at the time was working in Florida, to become the inaugural champ. Race's win was a pretext for crowning a champion that Scott had already established as the area's #1 heel, Johnny Valentine. Valentine defeated Race, becoming champion, and continuing what would be a long run of top-level talent holding the belt. Race's status as a former NWA World Champion gave the title instant credibility, and Valentine, who, forgive the pun, was no Johnny-come-lately, solidified the belt status. Sadly, Valentine's reign was short-lived, as his career ended in the 1975 plane crash that also injured wrestlers Ric Flair, Bob Bruggers, Tim Mr. Wrestling Woods, and announcer David Crockett. 2 Texans Ride In. As noted in our video, the deadly plane crash that nearly ended wrestling, JCP was in a bad way as the plane crash not only ended the career of its top heel, it sidelined rising heel star Ric Flair. Fortunately, George Scott was able to recruit Blackjack Mulligan. The big Texan was enjoying success in the WWF alongside Blackjack Lanza as WWF Tag Team Champions. Scott's efforts are described in the book, The Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. The tag teams. Booker George Scott needed a new feature attraction. He convinced Mulligan that he was that man, and the deal was struck. I believed in George Scott so much that I actually made the move from world champion to Charlotte, North Carolina, Mulligan said. I stayed there 7 years for George as a single. Blackjack, who had competed in the Mid-Atlantic area before, returned in November 1975, beginning his long run there. First, however, Crockett needed an interim champion. Once again, George Scott used a prestigious name to maintain the title status. In this case, the promotion held an actual tournament with Texas wrestler Terry Funk winning the title. As noted by historian Dick Bourne, Funk had been chosen as the next NWA World Champion, allowing fans to later on look back and note that 2 world champions had held the U.S. title. This was a smart decision, and one that was featured in other promotions, such as the NWA St. Louis Wrestling Club, where former NWA World Heavyweight Champions such as Harley Race held the area's top title, the NWA Missouri Heavyweight Championship. Terry Funk writes of his memories of the title win and the reason for his win. I won the tournament, beating Paul Jones, one of the area's most popular wrestlers, in the finals. It was an incredible night. We sold out Greensboro, and the newspaper there even covered it, saying it was the first sellout in the building's history of wrestling. It was also the biggest crowd Crockett had ever had up to that point. The whole thing was set for a rematch a couple of weeks later, and I lost the title to Paul Jones. The idea was that he beat me, so when I came back through with the world title, he was a natural contender. Funk's reign was short, with Paul Jones, who had battled Funk in the finals, getting a rematch. Jones, a former Golden Gloves boxer, was trained by veteran Paul Bosch and made successful tours of Hawaii, Japan, and Australia before landing in the Mid-Atlantic territory, where he won a cache of championships. One of those titles was the United States Championship, which Jones defended against the area's many talented competitors. Booker George Scott likely knew that fans would appreciate Blackjack Mulligan's talents much more if he gave the fans time to see him in action. This paid off when Jones later dropped the title to Mulligan in March 1976, and they fought over the title for over a year. Mulligan was booked as bad to the bone, and it was easy to believe because he stood 6 foot 10 inches and weighed over 300 pounds. However, Mulligan had remarkable quickness and surprised new fans with his array of moves. Blackjack proved a tough man to defeat, with various challengers coming up short against him. Mulligan knew how to bend and break the rules as needed to win. He also knew how to use the rules to his advantage. On one occasion, wrestler Paul Jones defeated Mulligan for the title. However, Mulligan protested the win to NWA President Eddie Graham. Graham ruled that Jones' legs were inadvertently under the rope, which made it an illegal pin. Consequently, Graham stripped Jones of the title, and it returned to Blackjack. Paul Jones was by no means the only challenger to the United States title. Blackjack had an extended feud with babyface Rufus R. Jones, no relation to Paul Jones. Paul Jones and Mulligan traded the titles until Mulligan eventually dropped the belt to legendary wrestler Bobo Brazil. With a career dating back to the late 1940s, the big and burly African-American wrestler was still a force to be reckoned with. The master of the Cocoa Butt was a former World Wrestling Alliance world champion and a perennial holder of the NWA's various United States championships. Bobo held different versions of the U.S. title in NWA territories such as San Francisco's Big Time Wrestling, Detroit's Big Time Wrestling, Maple Leaf Wrestling, and even the WWF, which was an NWA member at one point. Despite his impressive win, Bobo's reign wasn't designed to last long. Instead, George Scott wanted to use it to put the finishing touches on his long-term project, Nature Boy Ric Flair. As discussed in our 2 videos on Flair's early years in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Scott was grooming Flair to become the area's top star. Flair had succeeded beyond expectations, recovering from the 1975 plane crash and using his physical rehabilitation to transform from a power-based bulky wrestler into the lean and mean technical machine he became best known for. On July 29, 1977, Flair defeated Bobo Brazil, adding to his crowded trophy case of JCP titles. The Nature Boy defended the title against many top names, building his reputation in the process. The U.S. title became the cornerstone of a feud that would define the careers of Ric Flair and newcomer Ricky Steamboat, aka Richard Blood, for the next 2 decades. Blood trained with Vern Gagne, working on Gagne's American Wrestling Association, AWA, before a run in championship wrestling from Florida. There, promoter Eddie Graham transformed Richard Blood into Richard Steamboat, telling Ricky that Blood wasn't a good name for a babyface. Now billed as the kayfabe relative of wrestler Sam Steamboat, Steamboat began wowing fans with his exciting matches. One promoter wasn't impressed, however. The book, The Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, Heroes and Icons, notes how George Scott, the legendary booker in the Carolinas, first saw Steamboat on TV in Atlanta, where matchmaker Ole Anderson was using him in opening matches. Ole was way off based on this one. He didn't think Steamboat was box office and shipped him over to us. George Scott couldn't wait to get him, said referee Tommy Young. Ole's miscalculation opened the door for Steamboat in JCP, where he debuted in 1977 and scored an upset win over Flair for the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship. Ricky quickly won over the fans in the Carolinas, and his skyrocketing rise mirrored that of Ric Flair. Steamboat showed his previous title win wasn't beginner's luck when he defeated Flair for the U.S. title. These 2 wrestlers' fierce fights over the title foreshadowed their later battles over the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. JCP made it clear that its champions were always in their fellow wrestlers' crosshairs, and that everyone wanted a title. Steamboat had held the title less than 3 months when Blackjack Mulligan defeated him. Blackjack didn't enjoy the lengthy reigns as before, though, as Mr. Wrestling upended him on March 19, 1978. Like Bobo Brazil, Mr. Wrestling was an interim champion designed to facilitate a title change between a babyface and a heel. Coincidentally, the wrestler who defeated Mr. Wrestling was the same wrestler who defeated Bobo Brazil, Ric Flair. This time, Flair held the belt much longer, defending it against a who's who of wrestlers. Not until December 17, 1978, would Flair lose, again to his nemesis Ricky Steamboat. Steamboat's reign continued until April 1, 1979, when Flair regained the belt. On January 17, 1979, Flair put the belt up against the American Dream Dusty Rhodes. Like Flair's rivalry with Ricky Steamboat, this match was the preview of Flair's 80s battles with Dusty over the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, not only in the intensity of their battles, but the often controversial finishes to their encounters. As Tim Hornbaker describes their match, the struggle was fierce, and neither competitor wanted to give an inch, but obvious tension began building between Flair and Buddy Rogers, and at a crucial moment late in the match, Flair made a physical move directed at Rogers, and the original Nature Boy laid Flair out. Things looked grim for the champion. Indeed, The single punch sent Flair to the canvas, and Rhodes covered for a successful pin. Dusty was crowned the new United States Heavyweight Champion, and the audience went nuts in response. Officials reportedly reviewed tape of the match in the days that followed, and Flair was returned the belt due to Rogers' illegal actions. This wasn't the first time Flair had defeated Dusty on a technicality. A Dusty Rhodes win over Flair in September 1976 for the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship was reversed when officials deemed that Ric Flair's legs had been on the rope when he was pinned. Fans never knew what to expect with the title, and while controversy occasionally led to injustices for babyfaces, their eventual wins were made much sweeter. Changing allegiances. By 1979, JCP was one of the NWA's top territories. Quite the achievement considering the many quality promotions in the alliance. As historian Tim Hornbaker writes, in the death of the territories, during the last half of the 1970s, under the watchful eye of Booker George Scott, Jim Crockett Promotions, JCP, evolved as an organization and really became one of the crown jewels for the NWA, featuring outstanding talent like Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Roddy Piper, Greg Valentine, and Paul Jones. JCP was riding an impressive high, and Jim Crockett Jr. was lauded for his leadership. Booker George Scott knew the importance of keeping things fresh, which led to several surprising turns. For example, heels Ric Flair and Blackjack Mulligan became babyfaces, while heroes like Jimmy Snuka, Paul Jones, and Ken Patera opted to become heels. This created fresh matchups and also shook up the title scene. One such shakeup involved Ric Flair. Still United States champion, Flair's feud with Paul Jones led to him reforming his team with Blackjack Mulligan and chasing Jones and Baron von Raschke for the NWA World Tag Team Championship. When the team won, Flair surrendered the U.S. belt so he could defend his newly won Tag Team Championship, keeping with the area's tradition of a wrestler only being able to hold one title. Once again, JCP used the tournament to crown a new champion. This time, Jimmy Superfly Snuka won the title, defeating Ricky Steamboat in the finals. Snuka reigned as champion for 7 months, fighting off challenger after challenger. However, Snuka could not throw back the challenge of Ric Flair forever, who regained the belt in April 1980. By now, Flair is already considered a likely pick to become NWA World Heavyweight Champion, which only furthered the title's glory. The United States title became the focus of one of JCP's most violent feuds in 1980, Ric Flair versus Greg the Hammer Valentine. The former NWA World Tag Team Champions were now on different sides of the fence, with Valentine returning to the area as a heel. The Hammer was shocked at Flair's face turn, but over time seemed to renew his friendship with the Nature Boy, even agreeing to team with Flair against his arch-rival Jimmy Snuka and the Iron Sheik. However, Valentine was merely setting Flair up, and during the match he turned his back on his former friend, leaving Flair to get beat up by the two heels and joining them after the match in a further attack that saw Valentine break Flair's nose with manager Gene Anderson's cane. Flair's quest for revenge fueled a lengthy feud, with Valentine eventually defeating Ric for the title and Flair pursuing him for months, as he wanted both the title and his pound of flesh. Flair eventually regained the title, but a new rival showed up in the area, creating another legendary rivalry. Rowdy Roddy Piper entered JCP after years of building a reputation as one of wrestling's best heat magnets. Piper, whose ring skills were overshadowed by his promo skills, entered the area like a force of nature. The Rowdy Scott mixed the cunning of a trickster with that of a calculating criminal. He quickly captured the NWA Television Championship before setting his sights on Ric Flair. The two created a magical rivalry that lasted throughout the rest of their careers. Both men had the gift of gab and the in-ring ability to entertain fans they had talked into the building. Here, Piper did what he always did as a heel. He used cheating tactics to overcome an opponent's spirit and skills. In this case, Piper used a handy foreign object that he KO'd Flair with. True to form, Piper taunted Flair with his title win, offering to give the Nature Boy the TV title as a consolation prize. Flair dismissed Piper's hollow offer and began chasing him for the title. However, the National Wrestling Alliance had bigger plans for Flair as he defeated Dusty Rhodes to become NWA World Heavyweight Champion on September 17, 1981. Flair's days chasing the U.S. title were over, at least until the mid-90s when he defeated Conan in World Championship Wrestling. JCP had many babyfaces ready to chase Piper, including Chief Wahoo McDaniel. McDaniel returned to the promotion and began feuding with Piper. Their 1981 war over the title saw many brutal and bloody matches, with Piper invariably finding a way to steal a win. However, Piper's luck ran out on August 8, 1981, when Wahoo defeated the Rowdy Scott. Showing his usual cunning, Piper decided to try a different approach to dethroning Wahoo. Piper hired Abdullah the Butcher, who injured McDaniel during a TV match. Wahoo was injured so badly he couldn't defend the title. Unfortunately for Piper, the NWA didn't award him the title as he'd hoped. Instead, a new tournament was held. On October 4th, 1981, Sergeant Slaughter defeated Ricky Steamboat in the tournament finals to become United States champion. As we'll see in part 2, Slaughter would place a stranglehold on the championship just as vice-like as his Cobra Clutch finisher. Do you remember Jim Crockett Promotions' version of the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship from this era? If so, who are your favorite champions? Share your thoughts in the comment section, and let us know if there's any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.